Okay, joining us today out in Germany, as he's been throughout the tournament, we have the Athletics' Ollie Kay, and later on we'll be joined by our football correspondent David Ornstein as well. Ollie, we'll get into your piece in just a second, but while it's still fresh, your first reflections on how England played last night.
They've clearly had a lot of criticism for the way they played last night. I think, to me, it's looked a lot like people are taking sort of 4.5 weeks of frustration out on the team and on Southgate. I didn't think that performance last night was particularly bad. I thought in some ways it was the most creditable performance of the tournament, and that might sound strange when it's the first game they've lost, but it's the first time they've come up against probably one of the top three teams in the tournament, which I'd say France and Germany were the others. And it's the first time they've really given a reasonable account of themselves. And it's the first time they've looked like they were kind of carrying out a plan in a convincing way. You can debate the plan, but it kept them in the game first half. They got back into the game in the second half. I thought the performance against Spain was all right, really. The difficulty for me is that the rest of the tournament hasn't been good. They were lucky to reach a final, and that's something we've said all along. They were lucky to top the group. They were lucky to get Slovakia, and then lucky to get Switzerland in the quarterfinal. They were lucky to beat Slovakia and beat Switzerland. They did okay against the Netherlands, but really they got through to the final without playing more than sort of 45 minutes here and there. They rode their luck. I think they really, to beat Spain, unless Spain didn't turn up on the day, England needed to go up probably 1 or 2 gears, maybe 3 gears. They didn't do that. They weren't capable of doing that. And they looked like a team who were probably had reached their limit. And I think that's the regret to me. It's more the campaign as a whole than last night, which I know sounds strange when last night's the only game they've lost, but I feel like if they'd had a more convincing campaign, they would have been more optimistic in the way that they went about trying to play against Spain.
Yeah, Jack Pickbrook, gave us a little voice note, and he sort of summed it up saying, it's the end of something, but the continuation of familiar problems as well. And I know from your piece, as a whole, you've gone into some great insight there, especially around the relationship between, Gareth Southgate and Captain Harry Kane. Now, we talk about familiar problems. There will be conversation yet again as to how Harry Kane has performed in this tournament and actually what he is offering this England team moving forward as well, don't you think?
There will be conversation about it because he's a player who attracts, he's a high profile player who inevitably attracts scrutiny when he's not the sort of free scoring player that people expect him to be. He still won the Golden Boot, a share of the Golden Boot. I mean, I would agree with anybody who says he was way off his best at the tournament. I don't think he looked sharp at all, but I would say it was more. Look, we've had frequent questions and people like me and people like, ex-players working in the media have quite often said during the tournament, he doesn't look fit. Is he still carrying that back injury? Or is he not managed to get back to sort of full rhythm and full fitness, sharpness post-injury, having missed the final weeks of the season at Bayern? And the answer that has always come back from Southgate and from Kane is, he's fine. Everything's fine. He's fit, feeling good. Didn't look like it to me. I'm wouldn't surprise me at all if they've been sort of trying to make light of a problem in terms of his fitness or his back problem, and that we might hear something in the coming days. But I wouldn't judge Kane on the past. I wouldn't judge Kane's purpose and value to England moving forward on the past few weeks. I just don't think he looked right. I don't think Bellingham looked right a lot of the tournament. Some incredible moments, 2 incredible moments, but generally not where you would expect him to be. Foden, to me, didn't hit anything like the heights that you'd expect, apart from 45 minutes against the Netherlands. So it was a strange tournament, really, where nothing really seemed to click. And I think I would really warn against and preach against the need for snap judgments and knee-jerk reactions and saying, "Oh, let's move on from Kane now." I mean, he has been a brilliant player for England. He's still got, I think he's probably still got years ahead of him. I mean, people are talking about him like it's a Cristiano Ronaldo situation. Cristiano Ronaldo's 39. I think Kane is he 31 in a few weeks or something like that. It's I think there's a sort of, I think when Kane doesn't play well and when he doesn't look on it particularly, and it's been a case at previous tournaments where he's scored hatfuls of goals, he looks quite cumbersome. He's just got that nature about it. And I think people can, when they see that, and when perhaps now, when that's all a lot of people see of him all season because they're not watching the Bundesliga every week, I think there's a danger of thinking, oh yeah, he's past it. I don't think he's past it. I think he's absolutely someone you build with and build around going forward, and probably try to find a way of getting more out of him moving forward.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Bellingham there in your piece. I thought it was really fascinating. The insight you gave on Jude Bellingham's sort of position within the England setup. And, coming into this tournament, so many people would have seen this incredible Adidas, campaign,
I love it.
Sort of, it's brilliant, right? But also pinpointing him as, I guess, the saviour of England. I wonder how disjointed that must feel, though, in comparison to this sense of unity that I guess Gareth Southgate and England are sort of trying to portray as well. To have this one talisman who's going to save the day, which technically he did against Slovakia, if you think about it, with the overhead kick. But I wonder if that could also be quite disjointed in terms of team unity as well.
Yeah, I know. I don't know about sort of impact on team unity, but I know that there are people in the camp, and I'm not necessarily talking about players, but people in the camp who felt that was a bit clashed a bit with the general ethos of the Southgate era, where everything has been far less sort of star orientated and a lot more about the collective, and we've all talked positively about that and the team culture and how they're not a bunch of individuals anymore. And I felt they were bailed out by individuals at this tournament. Saka against Switzerland certainly, and Bellingham against Slovakia. It was big moments from big individuals rather than coherent team performances. So and in terms of Bellingham, look, there was murmurs about that, sort of saying, oh, what do you think of that advert? I mean, might put a few noses out of joint type of thing. That's kind of conversation I had. And it was pointed out to me because I was asking a few questions about Bellingham, and this was earlier in the tournament, and someone said to me that he's in a different area to, he's different profile to all the other players in that squad. One, that he's a superstar from the age of 18, 19. Two, that he's playing at Real Madrid, which automatically brings a different profile, and absolutely tearing it up in Real Madrid in his first season. He's a superstar, and I don't think Kane is a star, and other players are stars. Bellingham is becoming a superstar, and that brings its own pressure. But it was also pointed out to me that Bellingham isn't really close to that many players within the group because he's not part of that Premier League scene. He's never sort of lived amongst the other Premier League players in the Northwest or in London. He's gone straight to Germany at an early age. He's also sort of been fast tracked through the England age group teams. So from under 17s straight to under 21s very briefly, and then into the senior team. So he's not forged the same bonds and connections with a lot of his teammates as other players have. He's very close to Trent Alexander-Arnold, but I think he went into this tournament without many of those strong connections in the group. That probably means that if you're sort of strutting around having scored the winner against Serbia, and if you're shouting, who else, and if you've got that advert on and it's all over everyone's social media every 5 minutes, and brilliant advert, by the way, but you can see how he might not be as sort of shielded from suspicion and skepticism and cynicism as maybe a David Beckham in the or a Wayne Rooney in previous eras might be. So that's I think there were a lot of eyes on him in the camp, saying, can he deliver? Can he deliver? Because he keeps suggesting he's the man who's going to bail us out, and I don't think that's necessarily very helpful. And he did deliver in big moments, but I think overall, I mean, he's another one. His season at Real Madrid, amazing for the first half, wasn't quite at the same level in the second half of the season, and I don't think apart from that Serbia game, his first game, I thought he was outstanding for an hour. But overall, I don't think he really hit the heights consistently. I mean, moments, yes, absolutely. Those were real heights. But in terms of overall performance and impact on games, again, another one that didn't really get where you would expect them to. And then when you look at the number of players that applies to, you think, well, maybe it's more of a sort of collective issue, malaise issue, physical issue than wanting to just point fingers at individuals.
I think you're spot on there, and I think even Bellingham at the end of the match, on reflection, to a reporter, was talking about the schedules that not just him but a lot of the players have to deal with, especially if you're a top player coming into this competition. And there's a part of me that sort of looks at it and goes, can we just applaud the fact that they've even turned something on? The fact that he scored an overhead kick, the fact that he even assisted Cole Palmer, to score, the equaliser. Because yes, there's a lot of pressure on these young men, but also we have to think that if you're a top player at this moment in time, and not just England, but I'm talking to all the other teams, I mean, you're playing a hell of a lot of games.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue. I mean, we can say, well, it didn't stop Spain, it didn't stop such and such team, but generally it means that the quality of football you see at tournaments is lower. I think it's often a case with international football where you expect it to be a bit lower than the top club teams anyway. But yeah, players are not conditioned to peak in June at the end of a long, hard season. I remember speaking to Frank Lampard about this years ago, and we were talking about the Olympics and saying, look, all those guys at the Olympics, they've been building up to that for 4 years. You go into a World Cup, you go into Euros, and you've been playing almost non-stop for 10 months or 11 months since pre-season started. You can't expect people to be at their peak, and they're not. And I think Spain were really impressive because they were, in terms of cohesion, but also in terms of mental freshness, physical freshness, they just looked way above every other team in the tournament. I thought it was really impressive, and it can often sound like an excuse when you say it about players from failing teams, that they weren't fit or whatever. But I just don't think England looked fit and sharp at all compared to their previous tournaments under Southgate. It looked more like a sort of throwback to previous generations of England teams where they would all sort of turn up looking knackered and like the weight of the world is on their shoulders.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to Gareth Southgate. Many would say he is the most successful English manager for the men's team ever, really. 2 Euro finals, a semi-final, a World Cup. How would you judge, and we've touched on this in the pod over the summer in general, how would you judge Southgate's 8 years as manager, Ollie?
Well, I certainly wouldn't say most successful ever. I mean, Sir Alf Ramsey sort of remains head and shoulders above, I think. But I do genuinely think, and it irritates the hell out of people when I say it and when other people say it, but Southgate has been the best England manager since, in terms of consistency of performance, in terms of getting to finals, getting to semi-finals. It's people say, oh, what about Bobby Robson? Bobby Robson was a brilliant manager, had brilliant time before and after England, but his 8 years in charge of England were not the same kind of joyride that Southgate's has been at times. There weren't many great moments. I lived through that, all of that. I remember it being appointed. I remember him that night in Turin when it all came to an end, and people just remember the end. They don't remember losing 3 out of 3 at Euro 88. They don't remember not qualifying for Euro 84. They don't remember sort of stinking out group stage matches against Portugal and Morocco and Ireland. Southgate's consistency as an England manager has been outstanding. People say, well, he's had a better group of players than before. I don't think so. I think he's got I think there's a really good generation of English players that has emerged, and I'm really excited by it because it's so much better than there was under the previous decade or so. But I don't think it's like the best. I don't think it's a generation full of world class players. I think it's a generation full of players who are competent and can play at Premier League level, Champions League level. Some of them really, really, really excite me. But I don't look at that squad and think that should be winning tournaments. And it's the same with Spain, to be honest. I don't think it's a vintage Spain team or squad. I don't think it's any on a par with 2008, 2010, 2012. So you can that is a stick with which to beat Southgate and say, look, you can be greater than some of their parts. I think England in the first two tournaments under Southgate were greater than some of their parts. Not something I've often said about England over the previous years. I think the 2022 World Cup, they looked like a really good team. Probably deserved to get into the semi-finals, but got a bit unlucky with the draw. This time, I think they got lucky with the draw. They got lucky with the results. They didn't look like one of the top three teams in the tournament at all. I don't think they even looked at it like one of the top six teams in the tournament. And that's the shame for me. I mean, if this is to be the end of Southgate's tenure, I think he should go with huge gratitude. And I think the only real regret was that in the final tournament, this tournament, they've not looked like Southgate's England. They've looked more like the sort of England teams of the past, and that's why I think it's wrong really to sort of conflate falling narrowly short here with falling narrowly short at the previous three tournaments. I feel this was a really unconvincing campaign from start to finish, and I think the things that England did well under Southgate previously, they didn't do well at this tournament. And things that he didn't do well previously, like substitutions, I thought he got right, but there wasn't enough that was right about this tournament. And if they had somehow got to extra time as second best last night, somehow held on for penalties, I think we would all, at some point in a conversation, a very euphoric conversation, I think we would all say, yeah, they got a bit lucky this time, didn't they?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, David, thanks for joining us. As you know, many of us would have seen yesterday post-match, so many of the players had so many wonderful positive things to say about Gareth Southgate. Jude Bellingham talked about how his relationships evolved with him over time. He's now someone you can knock on his door, have a chat with. And I guess something a lot of people don't realise about top coaches is that dynamic between player, coach, manager is so essential, and actually having an access point to your players and being able to understand them properly is so vital to getting the best out of them.
Yeah, I don't think we can underestimate the bond that has been built between Gareth Southgate and these players, past and present and even future. I'll come on to that in a bit. Over this 8 years or however long he's been in charge now, it's been a journey that has seen the national team become a source of pride and enjoyment for many players, which wasn't the case in a lot of instances before. You had people that didn't really want to go on international camps and pull out of them. And you've seen some of them talk about that since. And Gareth Southgate, despite being from a very different background to many of the players he selected, seems to have found a connection between himself, his staff, and the players, and among the players themselves, with cliques seemingly eradicated. And he's had to make difficult decisions. If you read Ollie's fantastic in-depth piece on The Athletic today, I'll never forget that squad announcement day when we were breaking stories about the likes of Harry Maguire and Jack Grealish, James Maddison the night before being left out, Marcus Rashford, some of the players that Gareth Southgate has come to rely on over the years, and then place his faith in sort of, you could say, risks or ambitious selections like Kobbie Mainoo. Definitely a success and a plus point for England in this tournament. And, we've seen players come in and be sort of integrated, like an Adam Wharton, an Anthony Gordon. Perhaps we'd like to have seen him play more in this tournament. Jude Bellingham rising to the fore. And so No, it's a really difficult day to sort of pick over the bones of what's happened. A lot of frustration, a lot of what if, a lot of unfulfilled dreams, and heartbreak. There are a lot of recrimination, and I've been listening to and reading all of the coverage, and a lot of animosity towards Gareth Southgate and his staff. But Gareth Southgate has put England in a position where we're actually in with a shout of winning things. Many of us grew up and saw England failing to qualify for, say, USA '94. Even when England qualified, failing to get out of group stages or failing to progress deep into the knockout rounds. Now under him, they have, reached the last two European Championship finals. They've gone far in the World Cup. They've reached a first final of any major competition on foreign soil. And now comes a really testing period where changes are going to have to be made. He's going to have to make a decision on whether he continues to USA, and I don't think it's as clear cut as many people are making out, and that's why he didn't commit one way or the other on the night. Proper discussions need to be had. There's some genuine arguments for and against, and whatever members of the public think about Gareth Southgate and fans, and ultimately internally at the FA as well, those players, they seem loyal to him. And, I think with time, we will come to reflect on hopefully not this golden generation, which is a tag that hangs like a noose around the neck of every England generation, but a period in England's history where Gareth Southgate brought England up to the top and brought many players into a stage of their careers that their predecessors have not experienced.
Yeah, you spoke about what ifs for England. I guess I'm really interested in what next, and you've sort of touched on it there, David. What would that process look like after the tournament in terms of what Gareth Southgate's future might look like? Is that something he has to go away and talk to his people about, and then go to the FA and have a chat with them? Because the FA will clearly have a sense of, I guess, what they want from him.
The Football Association want Gareth Southgate to continue. That was clear in the months leading up to the tournament. We saw reports emerging that there was a contract ready for him to be signed if he wanted it. It would do them no greater pleasure than to extend with Gareth Southgate. He didn't want to discuss the contract until after the tournament, which is understandable. And it was maybe quite shrewd to tie him down until December of 2024. So that, unlike with some of his predecessors, the contract ended, for whom the contract ended straight after the major tournament in the summer. They now have some time and space. Yeah, the Nations League fixtures will come around, but as soon as the dust settles on this and the pre-season gets up and running in the domestic competitions and the Premier League begins, eyes will come away from England for a period of time, and they'll have some proper discussions. Now, of course, some of those discussions will happen immediately, and what I've just said may be superseded by a quick decision one way or the other. But we know where the FA stand on this. Gareth Southgate has come through their system, perhaps a little bit inadvertently after the Sam Allardyce debacle, you could say, his short reign, extreme to say the least, in charge. But he has he has absolutely immersed himself in the system, in St George's Park, in the DNA, in the pathway from the 2018 World Cup. I was out there and really felt that that glorious summer where England reached the semi-finals in Russia, and the scenes back home, and the songs for Southgate and the man in the waistcoat, and that group of players who really rose to the challenge. And then England went on, and the Euros final, and Gareth Southgate had a lot of food for thought after the World Cup in Qatar. I remember those days. We were frantically making phone calls after that defeat against France, where it seemed he'd be walking away. Then he was convinced to stay. And now we find ourselves in a similar position. I think from a public perspective, the goodwill towards him, with total respect from me towards him, is in as short a supply as it's ever been. almost all of the discourse that I've experienced seems to be in favour of a change to varying degrees of hostility. We saw him appallingly treated by a small number of supporters inside stadiums in Germany with empty beer cups thrown at him, which I think is disgrace and completely undeserved of anybody, let alone a man of his calibre. And that will have wounded him, whatever he says publicly, and the resilience that he shows in front of the cameras and to our faces. That would have really hurt him. Coming into this tournament, I felt that if he won it, he would almost certainly go on to USA, Canada, and Mexico, with the World Cup 26 being a bit of a shot to nothing, because some teams go from European Championship wins to World Cup wins, and that would be the ultimate crowning glory. And then maybe he looks to return to club management. I felt if he didn't, but gave a really impressive show of himself, maybe he would still go on to 2026. Then during the course of the tournament and some of the performances that we've all been frustrated by and the way he was treated, I thought to myself that even if England win it, he's going to go, this is just the end, because it seems many people, irrespective of the results, which are the most important things in competitions, are just not having him. They just don't like to see the fact that England have such talent at their disposal, and it's not manifesting itself in front of our eyes. And I do get that, and there are many reasons for it. Now England are out, it's over. I've spoken to a lot of people sort of around the England picture and setup and situation. And although our instinct is maybe, yeah, he's gone now, it's over, and maybe that will be the case. Some conversations I've had point towards a lot of people, and I think this will get through and is probably already felt by many people at the FA. And sorry if this upsets people, think that he remains the best person to take England on for a few reasons. Nobody knows the current and the next generation of players better than Gareth Southgate and his staff. Somebody like Lee Carsley, the under-21 manager, is very highly rated, and some people I speak to would like to see him integrated more into the senior setup, because they know the players for the next 7 or 8 years that England are going to be relying on. Nobody has done more work on them. Nobody has worked with them. Now, you may turn around and say, you know, a change is needed, a fresh perspective, somebody that can get England over the line. But that's a very simplistic thing to say. England have tried big name foreign managers in the past with the so-called golden generations, and that hasn't worked. What Spain have done is promote from within and seek that continuity. They've not focused on the star individuals. They've actually focused on the cohesion, the collective, the patterns of play, the style and the DNA that probably England are still lacking. And it does take time. I heard Guillaume Balaguer on the radio talking about it with Spain. There is patience required, and nobody likes that word. And then finally, in and amongst all of that, but last but not least, is the alternatives. Like, immediately people say, oh, go for Eddie Howe, you know, similar level of character and human, but maybe a more expansive, exciting coach. Well, let's see if Eddie Howe would be the pick. I think he's very highly rated. Or if he would want to leave club football at this moment in time. Graham Potter's available, and the FA have liked him for a lot of a long period of time. Does he want to do it? Does he want to go into club football? Would he be the pick? Would the fans have him any more than Gareth Southgate? Then people throw in names like Jurgen Klopp. Does Jurgen Klopp want to do it? He's already turned down the US.
He turned down the US job, didn't he? Yeah.
Approach. Would English supporters and the public be accepting of a German manager, however good Klopp is? Oh, let's take Guardiola. Well, Guardiola's Manchester City manager. No indication he wants to leave that, although he's only got a year to go on his contract, or take the England job. These things are not as simple as many people are making out, and that's why it needs a proper conversation that Mark Bullingham, as the chief executive of the FA, I presume will lead, with John McDermott as the technical director of the FA, and a small number of others, with, of course, the input of Gareth Southgate, of Steve Holland, as they did in the aftermath of Qatar, and they're going to do again now. And I don't think it would be sensible for us to prejudge a decision, because whatever we want, we don't know which way it's going to go. And my final point on all of that is that whatever we say and whatever grumblings we have about Gareth Southgate, his style, his ability to get the best out of these players, I think he has shown in every major tournament. Qatar wasn't fantastic with the exit to France, but the finals and the progress, that he knows better than us lot. Like, we're the greatest armchair critics, but he's done a bloody good job, whether people like it or not. Whether he proves to go on, we don't know, but a bit of credit and respect deserves to be put on his name.
Yeah, I mean, Ollie, based on what David said there, coming into this tournament, Gareth Southgate sort of alluded to the fact that if he didn't win, then he'd have to sort of think about what to do next. We talk about this atmosphere that's been built around the England squad in this tournament. Could that have a direct impact on how he feels about what his next steps might be?
Yeah, it can. I mean, he's been he's kept his cards very close to his chest. We, and David in particular, we've been asking all kinds of questions for months, really, but particularly in the past week and the past weeks and the past week, building up to the final, trying to get some intel on what Southgate's plans are. And the word that's come back is that he will wait until, he was going to wait until the tournament was over. Didn't feel like the emotions of the past week were the time to make any kind of decision. He wants to sort of take a step back, try and work out how he feels, how the FA feel. I felt at various stages in the tournament like he's spoken like and acted like somebody who's made their mind up and feels they're in the final weeks of the job. I think some of his words last night where he was talking about England have some great young players. It was as if he was talking about the legacy awaiting the next manager, which was fascinating. Maybe it was just a sort of verbal tick, but I have been expecting him to sort of call it a day, win or lose last night, win or lose last Wednesday. I think 8 years in this job is remarkable. I don't think whoever comes will do 8 years. I think he's actually stayed. I mean, we've seen what the England job has done to managers in the past. It's really worn them down, diminished them, beaten them one way or the other. I don't think the England job has particularly beaten Southgate. I think he's done really creditably. But I felt that this tournament, even going into it, I felt that this is probably his last go, because I don't think, from what he said in the past, I'm not sure he would have the energy and desire to go again. I think he has felt that it was sort of coming to the end of a cycle. So I'd be quite surprised, really, if he turns around and says, "You know what, I'll stay." But I could understand why the FA would view it as the safest option for him to stay, because it's only 6 weeks or something till the Nations League starts. Unlike the sort of failed campaigns of 2016, etc., where England are out by the third week of June, there's hardly, if you're going to Newcastle and saying, "Oh, would we be able to speak to Eddie Howe?" And I don't know, I'm just using that as an example. I mean, they're in pre-season. The start of the Premier League season is sort of three and a bit weeks ago, three and a bit weeks away. That becomes very problematic. You'll then perhaps, you might get knocked back by Newcastle, might get knocked back by Eddie Howe. Then you're on to perhaps second or third choice. I don't take seriously at the moment the possibility of getting Klopp. I just can't see it. He'd be great, but I can't see it. So it might be the safest option just to go with to stick rather than twist. And I think people will be a bit underwhelmed by it, but I think they've also got to say, well, if that happens, I think there's also a slight sense of, well, maybe it's a sensible, safe thing to do. But I just don't think it's particularly the sensible thing for Southgate. I think he's seemed increasingly worn down the last couple of years. He's been increasingly mindful and vocal about the sort of public and media mood turning against him, a bit less patience. So I think he might just sort of go away, spend a few days talking about it, thinking about it, and then think, yeah, I'll I'll walk away now with my head held high. And if that happens, he really can walk away with his head held high. He's done a really, really good job. Not the perfect job. We can all split hairs, nitpick, say what he should have done differently. But to me, it's by far the most impressive England manager tenure of my lifetime. And I'm 50 next year.
Ollie, I mean, look, I was watching that match thinking, Nico Williams, wow. Yamal, wow. And Rodri, player of the tournament, wow. I mean, they do have a plethora of talent at their disposal. And I think as well, it's the structural flexibility of Spain that really fascinated me. You look at the dying moments of that match, they didn't even have a recognised centre forward. Oyarzabal is a left winger, plays forward, but he's not a proper forward, yet plays like one. I mean, Spain have been incredibly impressive this tournament.
They have, and it's not. I mean, I've said a few times, I don't think in terms of the talent within the squad, I don't think it's close to the level of the 2008, 2010, 2012 team. I don't think we're going to see a sort of dominant Spain era the way we did with Xavi and Iniesta, Busquets, Alonso, etc. You know, what an incredible generation that was. This, to me, seems like a really talented generation, but perhaps one that's been really pleasantly surprised by how things have come together here, by how some of the other big nations, you know, notably France, notably England, haven't really performed to the expected level. So I think that'd be really good. But what really strikes me as the difference, I mean, we talk about Yamal and Williams in particular, and the quality that they've shown in a tournament. I think, you know, have they done anything that we don't think Saka and Foden and Palmer and other players are capable of? I feel England's players could have, had they gone into this tournament with real kind of wind in their sails and really hit the heights that they're capable of, they could have produced the same moments of brilliance. I mean, Saka did produce a moment of brilliance against Switzerland. Bellingham did against Slovakia. I think England players are capable of those moments. What I don't think they've proved capable of at this tournament is the same. Was it flexibility? Was that the word you used? I feel the flexibility, the intelligence, the cohesion, everything else like that, the sort of intangibles really of the game. I think that is where Spain really excelled. And Spain, they just produce really, really, really intelligent players. Technical, but also really, really intelligent. Dani Olmo, another one, never really gets much credit. Fabian Ruiz, but really, really intelligent players. England have gone from not producing technical players to producing loads and loads of really good technical players and really exciting players who could play a variety of roles and so on. But I don't feel like the sort of ability to control a game, the ability to put your foot on a ball, be composed, just always understand space, understand the rhythm of a game. I don't feel like that is something that really still doesn't seem to come naturally to England's players. Declan Rice, really good midfielder, but you know he's not a Sergio Busquets or a Rodri. Jude Bellingham, a fantastic, different kind of player, but again, there's a certain type of player that England lack, and I think Kobbie Mainoo has had a really, really good tournament. But you're asking so much of a 19-year-old to be the player who sort of makes up for a kind of intelligence deficit, composure deficit throughout the whole team. So I think that's the difference. It's yes, there's a sense of underperformance in the tournament. There's a question mark about tactics. There's a question mark about mood within the camp. There's a question mark about, you know, energy levels and all of that kind of thing. And I also think there's that other issue, which is about know-how, composure, having that type of player or those types of player throughout the team who can just put their foot on the ball and just dictate, be calm, turn having the ball into a period of possession. I don't think England have mastered that. That's the other frustration. I've listed all those sort of wider macro issues. I've talked about sort of individual player issues like Kane and whether he was fit. We can all talk about system issues, but I think that is a real shortcoming as well.
Yeah, just to finish on this very quickly, if that is a shortcoming, is that something that can be taught? Because this is a group of young players who we might see in the next 2 or 3 major tournaments. What I'm thinking is, are England fans to prepare themselves for yet again another few tournaments where we go, we almost got there, but we just couldn't get it over the line.
But that's a big improvement on what it's been for most of the year. I mean, if it's like anything less than the winning it isn't good enough, then yeah, I'm sure there are more disappointments around the corner. We were asked. It was before the final. I think the writer on The Athletic were asked, "Can you predict your Euro winners in 2028?" And I just said, I think I really hate to do this, but I'm going to say England, because they have got really, really good young players who at that point you never know how they'll all develop. We've seen with Raheem Sterling and Rashford and others, Dele Alli. It's not always linear in terms of players' development. Sometimes players can be brilliant in the early 20s and not be on the scene by the late 20s. But I do feel like a lot is going right in terms of player development in England, in terms of the culture around the England team. I feel England should be in contention at the next World Cup, should be in contention at the next Euros if all goes well. That feels a long way away. I do feel they're going to just have to find another dimension to the team, and I think it's that kind of player or those kind of players that I talked about, not just technically really good players or quick players, but players who are just fantastic on the ball, not because they can put it somewhere, but because they know how to use it and know when to go long, know when to go short. I do feel that's something that we just haven't quite cracked.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll all be waiting with bated breath to see if Gareth Southgate is the man to lead England to the next tournament as well. Ollie, David, thank you so much for your time. Well, that is it for the Athletics FC podcast for a couple of weeks. We'll take a short break and be ready for the new season, raring to go. David will, of course, be super busy with transfer, so stay across the Athletic for the very latest on that, including the Premier League teams in action on tour in the USA. As always, thank you so much for listening. Enjoy your rest. If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.